Freshman Corner is confident going into a big test Saturday evening, a few keys to victory, and an interesting note about the College Football Playoff Committee. All that and more in this live episode of Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and this episode of Locked On Buckeyes is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. We are live on a Thursday evening, October 28th in the year 2021. And as the Buckeyes get ready for a big test Saturday evening against the Penn State Nittany Lions, there's one player, lots of them, but one that spoke to the media just a day ago that just screams, exudes confidence. And the more I listen to him talk, the more I watch his demeanor while he's answering questions from the media, I like him a whole lot more than I already did. This weekend is a big test for Ohio State. Their defense, who last year, Jahan Dotson had a big day, 3 touchdowns, over 100 plus receiving yards. I mean, it just seemed like in that game, if you didn't know who Jahan Dotson was going into it, you knew who he was at the end of the matchup. And this year, Sevyn Banks, the guy who guarded, Sevyn Banks and Shaun Wade were the corners during last year's games. This year, no one's really looking at Sevyn Banks the same way as they did last year. All eyes are on true freshman cornerback, Mr. Denzel Burke. Denzel Burke, a true freshman that came in, was not expecting to play right away or to start right away, but once he got on the field and once he started getting ready and getting acclimated to the college game, the speed, the physicality, everything that goes with it, we saw that he was up to the task, and it did not take very long before we found out that Denzel Burke is the guy that is ready, that Ohio State needs right now to go on a deep run, to have a lot of success this year. He is going to be a big part of it. Well, Wednesday evening, while talking to the media, he was answering questions, had about 6 minutes there, answering questions from the media that were there at the Woody at the end of that practice that day. And there were some questions that came his way, one that I really liked. I believe this Jeremy Birmingham from Letterman Row, he simply asked him, "Hey, Denzel, describe your game." And it took Denzel Burke a little step back for him to answer that question because he said, no one's really asked me that question before. And so he gave off these 4 things. He said he's technical, he's physical, he talks trash sometimes, and then he also said he always wants to be in your face. Those are things that I think as a corner, even if you don't talk, if you're always in somebody's face and if you're always beating them and you're there before they are on their own route, that's one thing that will be something that will hinder somebody, that may be a big problem for them because they can't be as successful. They can't do what they're supposed to do because you're reading them before they're even doing the move that you're anticipating. But he also made a comment about Jahan Dotson. Now, it was a negative comment about Jahan Dotson, but it was more something about how he's viewing this matchup. I believe this question came from Nathan Baird from Cleveland.com, was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And Nathan asked, as you watch film, what impresses you about Dotson? Jahan Dotson is the player he is speaking of. This is word for word what Denzel Burke said. Quote, "He's a pretty good receiver. Nothing I can't handle, though." End quote. Now, if you're going to go around the social media, and I know that I'm not going to call publications out, this is what they do. It's just a part of the game. You may go out and you may see people that are going to take what he said and just put it out there in a quote. No words, no video, no nothing. Just a quote, a graphic, all that stuff. And if you may see that, you may say, man, that dude, that's bulletin board material. what he is doing, I hope if you're a Penn State fan, you might say, man, I hope Jahan Dotson sees that. I hope Jahan Dotson is ready for what is going on, what Denzel Burke just said, because he simply said so easily, so nonchalantly, he's a good receiver. Nothing I can't handle, though. But as you watch the video and as you watch the interview, I watched it via YouTube. I believe 11 Warriors put it up on their YouTube page. It doesn't seem like that was just straight bulletin board material. Now, you could use that and twist it and say, oh, he said that so nonchalantly, but he's simply a humble individual. This is Denzel Burke, a humble individual, a humble player that has seen numerous players previously, that has seen a lot in college football, has not seen Jahan Dotson yet that will pose a threat that maybe other players that Denzel Burke has gone up against, maybe they have not put up against him yet. But Denzel Burke also knows, not saying he's looking ahead, but he's focused on this game. But he also knows in a couple weeks, we'll have to go up against David Bell, who might be the only receiver in the Big Ten that would have a chance to start at Ohio State. Yes, we all love Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I do think David Bell is good enough, is that good, that he would compete for a starting job at the Ohio State University. He is that good. He has David Bell coming up. Then he also has Naylor and Reed from Michigan State the week before the game against Michigan. So you're going to have a big test this week off because Wan'Dale Robinson is not at Nebraska. He's now at Kentucky. Nebraska is Nebraska. A tough test on the road, but it's still Nebraska is Nebraska. Then you got Bell. Then you have Naylor and Reed, and then you have Michigan. So I do think Burke knows, hey, I'm about to go on. I'm about to have some big tests coming up, not just this week, but down the road as well. I can't go into this game, into this matchup, and have a big head and not stay level-headed. Because if I go into this game not level-headed, and if I go into this game in a way that is going to potentially mess up my mindset going into the future games that I'm going to play this year, yeah, Dotson is a good receiver, a really good receiver. But, man, David Bell's a different test. If you go into that overconfident, David Bell might burn you, might torch you, and you might be looking back and watching the film saying, man, my mindset a few weeks ago is what possibly messed me up in this matchup against one of the Big Ten's one of the nation's best receivers. You are tapped into Locked On Buckeyes Live here on a Thursday evening, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. A quick reminder, we're back with our regularly scheduled post-game show at the conclusion of Saturday night's game against Penn State. We'll be live right here on YouTube. Just search Locked On Buckeyes on YouTube. And also on my personal Twitter page at jstevens07. We will be live there. So make sure YouTube or personal Twitter page. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Hit that bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live. Also hit the like on this video as well and every video you watch. It just helps the channel grow and continue to grow. A big matchup against Penn State, and I'm not going to be one person. I know I've said I think Ohio State will win the game. I'm not sure if they're going to cover or not. That is not an indictment against Ohio State. That's just a praise for how good the Penn State defense is that they have that is coming to Columbus on Saturday evening. But as I look at different ways and how Ohio State beats Penn State this weekend, there are a few things in mind. And the number one thing that I think about when I think about not only how good this defense is, but also the physical status and the health of Sean Clifford, this is something that Ohio State has done very, 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 very well over the past few games. But one thing comes to mind. Get off to a fast start. One way, an easy way to derail a good defense that has an offense that has struggled mightily at times, get off to a fast start. Sean Clifford has played better. I have never been the biggest Sean Clifford lover or believer, but Sean Clifford's play this year has been a lot better than I expected, and I got to give that young man his props. Auburn, good job. Phenomenal job. Now, you may say, Jay, they've had close wins. They have not always been the best team in college football. That is true. But however, one thing I will say, Abe Griggs, I appreciate that. I'm looking at the chat right now. Thank you for doing that very simple thing to help this show. One thing I do like about Penn State is that they're gritty. They'll grind out. They will slow down any attack you might have and things that you might do that are normal. They will slow them down. And in turn, what do you have? You have a game that might be a tad closer than you might think it will be going into the fourth quarter. With the defense like Penn State, one thing that aids them is that they are the aggressor. And any time that the offense might get a glimmer of hope or a slight view at the end of the road, Penn State says, no. You try to widen that margin. That's not happening against us. Get off to a fast start. We have seen in numerous games where Ohio State has, or in previous games, recent games, Ohio State has scored every time they've gotten the ball in the first half, and it's really been what has propelled them to be very, very successful. When was the last time that Ohio State did not score 50 points in a game? The Tulsa game. Think about that one for a little bit. In 7 straight games, Ohio State has averaged 7+ yards per play. Yes, 7+ yards per play. In 6 straight games, what has Ohio State done? They have had 500+ yards of total. 6 straight. 2 things that neither 2019 or 2020, 2019 LSU and 2020 Alabama, 2 things that neither one of those teams did. So when we think about all of that, how do you do things like that? You get off to a fast start, and you keep on rolling and rolling and rolling. I do think that's a key thing, a huge thing going on right now with Ohio State this weekend. Get off to a fast start. Another one. Only got 3 keys right now. Number 2, get after Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford had a tough injury. I believe it was in the Iowa game where he got hurt. I believe it was his rib injury. They ended up having a bye week the following week, which helped lead to him having longer time to recover from said injury. I don't know the specifics if it's a rib injury. I just know that people I have read, they have said that they have believed it is a rib injury. So I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it sure seemed like Sean Clifford was going to be out for a long period of time. But after seeing Taquan Roberson, sorry for butchering his last name, after seeing him in the game against Iowa that day, and you'll see, this ain't gonna cut it. Now, granted, he's not expected to go into the game, so his playbook is already going to be limited. But after seeing what he does in that game or what he has done, what he did, you may say, this ain't it. And I don't believe he's it. If Penn State has any chance to win the game, I do think it's Sean Clifford. Now, they have hopefully practiced more things with Taquan Roberts. Let me get his last name. I keep butchering it, and I feel bad. Taquan Roberson. There we go. I keep saying Robertson. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Taquan Roberson is his name. And one thing I do know is that when you're not prepared to play, you're going to find things. You're only going to work on certain things in the offseason and in practice. And then when you're thrust into a situation when you're not expected to be in the game, it's very interesting. Very interesting how things go in that moment. One thing to keep in mind, getting at the Sean Clifford with only your front 4 or maybe a 5th person blitzing, that clouds up the defense. That clouds up the passing lanes for Sean Clifford, a guy who is already going to be hurt just a little bit anyway, and in turn makes things a whole lot harder for him. Get after Sean Clifford, preferably with the front 4. Going to add that in there. Preferably with the front 4, because with as good as this defense has been, the defensive line has played in a way that they don't need to blitz as much as you thought they would right now in this season. And it does help them. It aids them to do that very thing because it helps them be very successful in the back half of the secondary. Number 1, get off to a fast start. Number 2, get after Sean Clifford. Number 3, communicate up front. The offensive line of Ohio State has been one that has been very, very dominant, has been very, very successful. We have seen videos of DeJuan Jones going around, and there was even one when he blew up McFadden. I keep forgetting his name. When he blew up McFadden off the line of scrimmage, he took a few steps, and McFadden went over to follow the ball, and DeJuan Jones just said, "Poof!" Yeah, that's probably what it sounded like, because McFadden was basically gone. He was on the ground quick, fast, and in a hurry. And so when you have an offensive line like that is very good, that has very sound, technically sound, communicating very well in these moments, but you're going up against a top 10 defense that can bring in different blitzes, different looks, pre-snap to post-snap. You'll want to communicate in a very big way. Non-communication on the offensive line will derail C.J. Stroud, possibly put him into really bad situations because there's a defender, an oncoming guy that wants to take him down quickly right in his face. Communication by the big guys up front. This offensive line is up for the running and wants to win the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in the country. It's possible, but a bad game in this matchup on Saturday night is going to be a big way that they could lose and be out of the running to win said award. Get off to a fast start. Get after Sean Clifford and communicate up front. Communicate up front specifically for the offensive line. I do think Ohio State wins. If they don't do those three things, this could be a long, long night for the Ohio State offense. You are tapped into Locked On Buckeyes live right here on a Thursday evening, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. One quick reminder for those of you that have not gone to Apple Podcasts, or maybe you have and haven't done it recently, head to Apple Podcasts. You're going to be watching via YouTube or watching right now live via Twitter. Go to Apple Podcasts right now. You can come back and finish this show later on. Go to Apple Podcasts right now. Leave a 5-star rating and review. I greatly appreciate it. It is a free way to help the show grow, and it's a free way to help more people know about Locked On Buckeyes and how this is the place to be to stay up to date with your Ohio State football and basketball teams. The basketball team has a scrimmage on November 1st, first game, or exhibition game, basically a scrimmage on November 1st. And then also their first game of the season is November 9th, where we'll be helping you prepare and get ready for that game on that day. So Heather Dinich, the ESPN reporter that covers the college football playoff and the committee itself specifically, she put a tweet out that I did not see until Thursday evening, tonight. Now, the tweet went out on Wednesday. I don't really have Heather Dinich on, I don't have push notifications, so I don't get notified when she tweets things. There's reasons why. And so when I saw this, it was first something that Josh Pate from 24/7 Sports, he hosts Late Kick with Josh Pate. It's a live YouTube show, and it's a podcast as well. Has a few question and answer sessions that he does a couple times throughout the week. He does the show 5 days a week, Sunday through Thursday, I believe. So it's a really good show. One of the few people I will recommend. I'm very critical. You guys have probably realized that by now, especially when it comes with guests that come on the show. I don't recommend everybody. I do not. Josh Pate, I do recognize. Go and follow him on Twitter. I would encourage that because he is really, really good at his job. So he quote tweeted this, and I won't tell you what he quote tweeted, what his response was. I'll just tell you what Heather Dinich said about the playoff committee. She is simply reporting. I am not knocking her for what she said. Heather Dinich said this, and I'm going to read it word for word. Quote, the committee's job is to pick the 4 best teams. It's stated in their protocol. Sometimes there is a conversation in the room. If these 2 teams played today, who would win? End quote. Is that something you want to hear about a committee that has a protocol, which she stated what their job is? Do you want to hear that sometimes there's a conversation in the room? If these 2 teams played, who would win? When we watch them on the television, they implement and they talk about the resumes. Strength of schedule this, strength of record that. Oh, top 25 wins. How many tough tests did they have on the road? How many conference wins do they have? How have they looked in this matchup? How have they looked in that matchup? Let's go ahead and think about something very quickly. If you look at some conferences, not every conference is made equal. The Big Ten is looked at different now than it was a month ago because we're seeing who the contenders are and who the pretenders are. We have seen in Iowa, we have seen going into the season, is Wisconsin going to be that good? And we have seen some teams fall. Some teams in this month, they are not the contender that some thought that they would be. They are simply a pretender. We could look at the ACC. Is the ACC really a conference that you think, oh, Hey, that's a battle-tested team. Whoever comes out of that conference, they have been tested night in and, week after week after week. Sorry, this isn't basketball. Week after week after week. No, you don't look at that with the ACC. In the SEC, yes, you will look at that conference and say they have been tested. Why? Because those teams down there are good. Why are Group of 5 teams looked at in a certain way? Simply because the competition is not the way that it is in other conferences around college football. Group of 5, Power 5. The teams they play are completely different. The level of competition is completely different week in and week out. With all that in mind, this upcoming Tuesday, I was not planning on doing this until the beginning of next week, but her tweet kind of set something off in my mind. Next Tuesday, the first college football playoff committee rankings will be coming out. We might do a live reaction. I'll confirm that at the conclusion of Saturday's game against Penn State. I'm not sure if we're doing a live reaction or not. We will talk about that later on. And so, one interesting thing about this situation here is that if you're going to use the resume on the television and say the resume, and this is how we have come across these situations as far as who is the better team based off not only the eye test that I don't believe these people want to say they use heavily, because I know they're busy. And I doubt they watch all the football like you and I might do every single Saturday. So if you're going to use the resume on television while describing why you have put the rankings in a certain order, but also having this conversation as well, isn't this a form of the eye test and not the resume, which always contradicts the way that you guys are getting to your committee rankings? Now, I'm not telling you which way to believe. I am just throwing thoughts out there about how things might be viewed via the committee on Tuesday evening when their first rankings come out. Very interesting thought. A very odd way to go into a weekend, the first weekend where you guys are going to be together putting this ranking together. You know, ESPN, they're going to go the top 4 plus 2 because, you know, the first 4, the top 4, those are the guys that are in right now. If there were a playoff coming right now, if the end of the season was right now, and you also have the next 2 because the next 2 could quickly be in the top 4 or outside of the top 10, depending on how they play in the upcoming week. The playoff committee is always put to a tough task. People have hated me for saying that I prefer the BCS over this committee because I think that this committee is fraud. One thing you do have that's interesting, when you have 2 people in the committee every single year, you're going to have different ideas, different thoughts, different humans in the room that might bring a different section of the human element into the room that you didn't have previously. So no matter what the protocol is and their rules, the committee is always going to be in a way that they are going to always have a different thought and be viewed at differently every single year. Keep this in mind. Coming Tuesday, the rankings, they're just talking points. The final rankings at the end of the season, that's what you want to wait for. Ohio State, take care of your job. Do your job. Handle every test. Handle every team that's right in front of you. At the end of the season, the chips will fall, not may fall. You do your job, the chips will fall where they may. I don't even know right now off the top of my head who is in the top 4, top 5 outside of Ohio State in the AP poll. It escapes me. I don't spend much time discussing or talking about in my off time much about the AP poll because that poll really don't hold no weight at all. It used to be the be-all, end-all when it came to polls, but those times are long gone. The talking points, they're still going to be here. We're going to have to see how the committee thinks on Tuesday. But Ohio State doing their job, that's the only thing they have to worry about. Playing dominant Ohio State Buckeye football, playing up to the standard that has been set at the Ohio State University, and the chips will fall where they may, and Ohio State will be where they want to be at the end of the regular season. Thank everyone who tapped in and tuned into another live episode here of Locked on Buckeyes. You can always follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can also send all of your emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com. If you want to text me, the text line is always open, 850-462-5442. as well. In the meantime, there's a little bit of time between now and the start of games on Saturday afternoon. Make sure you are tapped into and check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. As you make Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of every single day, feel free to make Locked On Big Ten your second listen of every single day to stay up to date with what's going on in the Big Ten Conference with Nate Dickinson, the host of the podcast, as he is joined every single day by a different host that covers a team inside the Big Ten Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, that is. I am there every Monday. Kevin McGuire, that was here on Thursday, he is with Nate every single Tuesday, and you will stay up to date with different hosts and Nate Dickinson with the Locked On Big Ten Podcast via the Odyssey app or wherever you get your fine podcast. In the meantime, the Buckeyes have a big test Saturday evening. I'm ready. I'm excited. I hope the boys are because, man, this game should be a lot of fun to watch.